Welcome to Bespoken Bones with your host, Pavini Moray, connecting ancestors, sex, magic, and science. Pavini explores transpersonal tools for erotic wellness every new and full moon, engaging educators, healers, spiritual leaders, and scientists in revolutionary dialogue. Get ready to feel good and go deep. This is Bespoken Bones.
Hi, and welcome to Bespoken Bones, ancestors at the crossroads of sex, magic, and science. We're in the business of healing trauma, connecting with our roots, and developing radiant erotic wellness in past, present, and future generations. I'm your host, Pavini Moray, and today I'm so delighted to introduce you to Dr. Judith Rich. Dr. Rich is a pioneering teacher in the field of transformation and consciousness. She's an accomplished transformational and personal effectiveness trainer with over 40 years experience in training design, facilitation, executive coaching, organizational transformation, and public speaking. Her work is focused on the awakening of one's dormant inner resources, empowering profound personal and professional breakthroughs for individuals and organizations throughout the United States, Russia, Asia, Mexico, and South America. As a speaker, writer, trainer, workshop facilitator, and leadership development coach, Judith brings insight, passion, humor, sensitivity, and wisdom to empower people's awakening to the brilliance of who they are. With bachelor's degrees and master's degrees from Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan, Judith began her career as a special education teacher, working with children and their parents to help unlock the potential of those with the biggest challenges. She received her PhD in archetypal psychology from the Archetypal Institute in Boulder, Colorado in 1995. As a writer, she has been a regular contributor to the Huffington Post since 2008. Dr. Rich lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. A mother and grandmother, she enjoys reading, hiking, music, writing, and spending time with her family when she's not traveling the world. She also works individually with folks, and you can contact her through her website at www.judithrich.com. That's JUDITHRICH.com. Welcome, Judith. So glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Pavini. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and I just want to speak to how I came to be aware of your work, which was I found your article on the Huffington Post that you had written about ancestors. And it was so thoughtful and well written that I wanted to have this conversation with you. So let's just dive in. And I'm curious if you'd be willing to talk about your definition of ancestors. What or who do you include in what constitutes an ancestor?
I love that question, and it's a pretty big question. It's like a question that really sets the context of my work and I think our conversation here today. You know, most people consider that ancestors are those in our personal lineage, blood and bone, so to speak, whose DNA we carry, those who have gone before. And I believe that, that's one aspect of who our ancestors are. But based on my own experience, the work that I have personally done, the healing kind of work that I've done, and the healing kind of work that I do with people, I've come to see that the idea of ancestor holds a bigger context in the sense that we are also ancestors. So the ancestors live in us as us in this moment. And we certainly are, in a very literal sense, the ancestors of those who come after us. But in addition, energy is never destroyed. So when someone passes on, the energy that they were remains and transforms. And so it not only lives on in us, but that there's also ancestors that live in the impersonal realm. So I actually consider that everyone is an ancestor, that as a member of the family called human being, as the species of human being, my identity also includes that everyone at all times is an ancestor. So if I go through the world with that awareness, it has me encountering people and engaging and connecting with total strangers in a very different way. You know, that I am here, I am called to honor every human being as my ancestor, as someone who has something to teach me, as someone to whom I have something to contribute. So my idea of ancestors really includes humanity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's a beautiful way to think about it. And I have a lot of questions that come up as you say that. But first, before I go there, I know through a previous conversation that you and I had, you told me about a very powerful dream that you had, which was when you first really connected with your ancestors. And I'm hoping that you'd be willing to share that today.
Yeah, certainly. So just a little background to that, if I may. I grew up in a family that, you know, I had two parents and two older brothers. We all lived under the same roof. My parents were married for 66 years. My grandparents died. Some of them died before I was born. My two grandmothers died when I was fairly young in age. So I never really had much contact with my own personal ancestors. So the idea of, you know, working with ancestors really didn't exist for me. So to have this dream just really bubble up from the unconscious came to me as quite a surprise and, of course, quite a gift. So the dream was this. In the dream, I'm standing in front of a long table, and seated at the table is a group of what I believe were ascended masters who called themselves the committee. And on the ground before me was a line, sort of like, you know, if you'd take your foot and or your finger and you'd trace a line in the sand. And so in the dream, the committee gave me these instructions. If you choose to step across this line, you will take with you your entire lineage, and it's entirely your choice. That's all they said to me. And as they said that, I could feel, in the dream, I could feel hands on my shoulders. And I could see the imagery of my entire lineage standing behind me, each of them with their hands on the shoulders of the one standing in front of them. So they were all connected with me at the head of the line. They were all connected back into ancient history, my lineage, whom I had no idea who these people were. But I knew that I could feel their presence. And I could feel, at that time, I could feel energetically their longings and the unfinished business of their lives. And so it felt to me like a responsibility, like a gift, to make the choice to step across the line. And so I did. It was an easy choice for me, but it had to be a conscious one. I needed to declare it as a conscious choice. And so in the dream, I said to the committee, I choose to evolve as a conscious being on behalf of all of my ancestors, for those who came before and those who came after. And at that point, I stepped across the line. And as I did in the dream, I could feel this rush of energy move through my body. And that movement of energy was so powerful, it woke me up. And so I woke up, sitting up, straight up in bed, feeling this rush of energy move through me and remembering this dream very, very clearly. So I had really no context within which to put that experience, since I had never done any previous healing work with my ancestors. So there it was. It just kind of came up seemingly out of the blue, certainly out of my unconscious. Looking back on it now, I kind of suspect that they had been waiting for that opportunity, to come to me at just the right moment to make themselves known to me and have me make the choice that was going to evolve them as well. And so from that time forward, and that was probably 10 years ago, from that time forward, I have been aware not only of my biological ancestors and their presence, but what we talked about a little, at the beginning of this podcast about my idea of ancestors. I have been aware of the connection that I feel with all human beings, and the opportunity that I have as a conscious human being who made this choice to evolve my lineage. I include humanity in that lineage. I am a link in that chain of humanity. And just a little personal story here, if I may, Pavini. Several years before this happened, I had a profound spiritual awakening. And in that awakening, I had the experience of being connected to everything. I had the experience of oneness, that there's only one. There's only one being, there's only one life, there's only one thing happening here, and we're all an expression of that one thing. Some people call that one thing God. Some people call it love. Some people call it life. Some people call it, creative intelligence. It's known by many names. We could just call it the one. So I had a profound experience of my connection with that. And later, the next day, I took myself to the beach. I lived in Southern California at the time, in a beach city, and I went to the beach that day. It wasn't a lonely private beach. It was a public beach, a Sunday that was filled. It was teeming with human beings, families and children and kids screaming and all of that. And I just sat there taking in all of that energy. And I had this profound awareness that I'm at a family reunion. And these are just all members of my family I haven't met yet. And that awareness has stayed with me since that time. And my goodness, that was probably, close to 40 years ago. That I am a member, that we all are members of this family called human being. And we just haven't met the various members of our family yet. And yet every moment is an opportunity to connect and to meet one another in some, personal or impersonal way. And so that's what I do. That's how I be in the world. That informs me as a being in the world. Pretty much no matter wherever I am. If I'm in the checkout line at the grocery store, or if I'm walking down a pedestrian path that runs along underneath the BART tracks. I live in the Bay Area in the East Bay, and I take a morning walk on a flat pedestrian trail, and I see, every walk of life imaginable, including lots of homeless people. And I see it as an opportunity to offer a blessing to every human being that I encounter, not spoken as a blessing, but just an extension of love, an extension of my heart. a silent greeting of I see you. I see you.
That's beautiful. Thank you. You write, I'm going to quote you here, as you step to the front of the line in your ancestry, the energy they embodied has been passed on and is now expressing as you and those of your current generation in this lineage.
Mm-hmm.
As you transform, the energy of the entire lineage preceding you is transformed. For it is all happening now, though you, through you, as you. You are the one who can heal old wounds for your entire lineage, forgive old enemies, shift conditioning and beliefs, release pain that has been held by preceding generations for centuries. And so my question is, how? How is it possible to evolve your lineage in both directions, like going back in time and into the future?
Well, first of all, it's possible because we're called to do it. And we hear the call and we answer the call. So I believe that we're all called to do this work of healing of our lineage. Every single human being is called to do that work. But we all don't hear the call. And not everyone who hears the call answers the call. So if we hear the call and something in us resonates with that call and we open ourselves, like in the dream, I was opened to answering that call, then it becomes a conscious choice. And so we choose to do that work on ourselves. So I heal the lineage of my past through things like, forgiveness work, starting with myself, because chances are the wounds that I'm carrying around which, I still hold myself hostage to old beliefs that and judgments about myself, perhaps that I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of loving or of giving or receiving love. That's a very common one that people carry. Or things that have happened to us, perhaps forms of abuse that have happened to us as children. There are numerous opportunities to do forgiveness work. And, I always make the distinction with people that to forgive is not to condone. I'm sure, a lot of people that I work with, confuse forgiving with forgetting or condoning. And that's not what forgiveness means. Forgiveness is literally, if you look at the root, it's the words forgive, and it is to give as before. So it is a choice to give our love as before whatever wound occurred. It's a choice that we make. And why would one make that choice? One would make that choice because it is really the only path to freedom. Forgiveness is the path to freedom. So healing old wounds, many of which involve forgiveness, and most of all, forgiveness of self, beginning with forgiveness of self. I forgive myself for not recognizing who I am. I forgive myself for not seeing and honoring who I am. As I do that kind of work, I'm also doing that on behalf of my ancestors. Because you can just imagine that if living today, if one has difficulty seeing and honoring oneself, what can you imagine it was like for our ancestors who really didn't have access to the kinds of consciousness that's available to us today? So we do the work on ourselves on behalf of those who came before. And as we do that work on ourselves and we heal those wounds, we have altered the trajectory of our life going forward, not only our life, but the lives of our descendants. There is a different platform of possibilities for them if we have healed the wounds of addiction or abuse or, a sense of unworthiness or not belonging. As we have healed that in ourselves, some new possibilities open up for those who follow. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I mean, I think what comes to mind is, so I am a white person, right? Mm-hmm. And my family are early settlers to Ohio and definitely participated in genocide of the Native American folks who were living there. And so this choice that you're talking about stepping across the line, obviously I've made that choice, but it's painful, right? It's like, to make that choice is to acknowledge and to recognize the things that my ancestors did that were pretty messed up, that were atrocities, that were oppressive, or that continue to be oppressive. And so I'm curious for folks who have those kinds of backgrounds like mine, or, whose families participated in slavery, or whose families, participated in the Holocaust. Like, when you have that kind of oppressor lineage and you have to make this choice, and that means reckoning with all of this, how do you make that choice?
I think every white person is faced with that choice, whether we respond to it or not. I have a very similar background and story as yours. I grew up in Ohio, in northern Ohio, but my family, the lineage is from Canada and from Germany. But, my people, my parents and my grandparents and generations before them were simple, rural people who worked the land. They were all farmers. They were not educated. They were very simple people. But I grew up in a family where there was overt racism. And I knew as a child, I heard the N-word in my house. And I knew as a child that wasn't right. Nobody told me, nobody taught me that. But I just inherently knew that wasn't right. And so, I grew up feeling shame about that. I grew up feeling guilty about that I have that in my background, even if it's not personal. I know that people in my lineage carried that. And I think that that's a very common thing for all white people in the U.S. anyway. Somewhere in our lineage, we can find ancestors who participated in some form or fashion in slavery or, abuse. And it's always painful to confront that. I think whenever we do healing work, the very essence of doing any kind of healing work involves confronting a wound, confronting a pain, confronting suffering. And that's never easy or comfortable. That's why I think it takes great courage to do this work. And so if one is called, then one is also called to be courageous enough to do the work, which I think is an enormous gift, that through doing this work, we grow in our courage and we grow in our ability to see others' suffering as our own and take responsibility for it. For example, I'm a white elder woman. I'm 75 years old. I live in the East Bay. I belong to a church in Oakland, a spiritual community that is probably 95% African American. We did a healing service. I participated as one of the leaders of this service. And it was called From White Privilege to Black Lives Matter. And there were 3 white people and 3 people of color who facilitated this service. And as part of that experience, we invited the people who were there in church that day, not all of whom were members of the church, but a lot of white people came to church that day. There usually aren't that many white people who come to this church. But that day, because we had put out the notice that we were going to do this particular racial healing service, a lot of white people were in church that day. So part of that healing service involved having all the Caucasian people stand up and form a circle around the African American people seated in the center. And we projected onto the screen in front of the room a prayer of healing and forgiveness that had been written by Marianne Williamson. And together we read this prayer to the people of color who were seated in the middle. And they were weeping. People were weeping. And they came up to, those of us who participated. And, people came to me and they said, I was so deeply touched by this experience. Thank you. I have been waiting to hear this my entire life. It was a prayer in which we were asking for forgiveness for the atrocities that had been committed by our ancestors. And so I think it really takes one having the courage to stand up in the face of their own fear, in the face of whatever, limiting beliefs or cultural conversations or considerations may stand between you, and actually taking a stand. So, it's the willingness to take a stand for what you believe in and to be a kind of human being who is that in the world and is a role model of that and an inspiration for others to do the same. So out of that particular Sunday healing service, the members of the congregation came to us and said, we want more. We see that this was only the beginning. We want more. So I think, there's a saying, Lao Tzu said, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I think we could even tweak that to say, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single choice. And just to make a choice, to step forward and take some kind of courageous action. The South Africans have a greeting. I learned this from my church, in which when they see one another, they don't say hi, hello. They say sawubona, which means I see you. So they greet one another with, I see you. So that morning in church, we put everyone in a mingle. And we had them encounter one another and mingle around and encounter one another and bow to one another and say sawubona. And I think really at the end of the day, that's all we human beings really want, is just to feel seen. Like I matter.
Yeah, I think when I hear you say that, there's another piece as well, which is doing this work in community, making the choice to step across the line, to acknowledge the wounds and the wounding that ancestors may have dealt with or committed, but doing it in community so that there's a sense of shared support, it sounds like, is important.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because, this isn't a solo endeavor. It really isn't. And I think that one of the biggest wounds that we all carry is the wound of feeling like we don't belong.
Right.
So there's a longing for belonging that has us seek out and connect in communities. So yes, I would definitely say you're right on with that.
Yeah, and I think that at least personally speaking, having a place in my lineage, knowing I belong in my lineage, has helped to heal some of that wound of belonging. I'm curious if you would be willing to facilitate some of the work that you do right here, right now.
Okay. All right. So for the next few minutes, I'd like you to just allow yourself to close your eyes, to be seated in a comfortable open body position. Allow your focus and your energy to come to center. And together, we're going to take a nice, big, deep breath in. And at the top of the breath, we'll hold the breath for just a few seconds. And then we'll let it go with a sigh. So together, let's breathe in, hold the breath, and bless that breath as you release it. Allowing any tension in your body to relax, allowing your shoulders to relax, and just breathing normally, becoming aware that this breath that you breathe is the breath that breathes all of life. It is the breath that breathes and sustains all human beings on the planet, all the planets in the universe. It's the breath that animates your body, all your organs, your tissues, your cells. Knowing that that breath connects us all. We are all connected through that breath. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to just allow yourself to stay connected to my voice and follow me on a journey. We're going to take a journey together. And on this journey, we're going to go into a place of nature. So just now see yourself in a beautiful place in nature. However that appears for you. You might find yourself in the mountains. You might find yourself on one of your favorite hiking paths. You might find yourself by the sea. You might even find yourself in a favorite place in your home. In this place, this is a place where you feel safe, you feel comfortable, you feel relaxed. And from this place, see yourself standing on a path. So you don't know where this path leads you, but you begin to follow it. And it just begins to take you to a place you've never seen before. You follow the path. Now you're in a forest. The path is now shaded by heavy tree growth overhead, and the air feels cooler. And you can feel the tall grass brushing up against your legs as you keep moving down this path. You don't know where it's going, but you know that something is there for you. You feel called to something, and so you follow it. You find the path leads you to a stone formation that is like a cave. It's like a mound in the earth that's like a cave, and you feel called to go in. You feel safe. So you enter this cave, and inside, it's quite spacious. You move on into the cave and you just look around. It's just this big, dark, open space. And you become aware that a few feet in front of you is like a grotto. And there's a candle burning on at the grotto. So you move up to it and you're called to kneel down before it. And you have a sense that this is a sacred place, that this is a sacred moment, and that this is an opportunity that you've been called here to connect with one of your ancestors, someone perhaps you don't know, perhaps you've never even heard their name, or maybe this is someone that you've only heard about, you only know about them by name. But you're going to have an opportunity to speak with them and ask them whatever question is on your heart, and to ask them to share with you whatever question is on their heart, what they want you to know, and for you to share with them what you would like them to know. And before you do, take a moment to speak a prayer, to speak a blessing. You can do it in silence, you can speak it out loud, whatever you're most comfortable with. But take a moment to speak a blessing to this ancestor and to all of the ancestors in your lineage, and to all of your greater ancestors. To speak a prayer of blessing and thanksgiving for this invitation that they have extended to you, because you are not here by accident. You are here because they called you here. So you take a moment to give thanks. Dear ancestor, I thank you for this opportunity to connect and be with you, to receive your blessing, to receive your prayers, and to hear from you, to have you share with me what's in your heart, and for me to share with you what's in mine. I give thanks for this opportunity. I extend my heart, my love, my acceptance, my understanding, and my gratitude. And so it is. And now you speak to them, either out loud or in silence. What question is in your heart? What is it that you want to learn from them, you want to know from them? And then you wait for them to respond. And now you invite them to speak to you with whatever is in their heart that they want to share with you, that they want you to know, that they want you to heal. Invite them to share with you and receive. And as you receive their request, you bow to them, you bring your hands together and you bow to them and honor them and you thank them. Dear ancestor, I thank you, I honor you, I see you, I feel you, I know you. And I take responsibility and I consider it an honor to carry forward and to honor your request and to carry forward your work through me in my life, as my life, into the world. And now, sit in that energy for just a few moments. And then take another deep breath in and hold the breath at the top and let it go. And you rise from this place and you leave this place. You walk back out the path and you return to your body. Wiggle your fingers and your toes, move your head from side to side, become aware of yourself seated wherever you're seated. Let your feet feel contact with the floor. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Now, at this point in a training, if I were facilitating this with a group, I would most likely have them take out some kind of writing material. And there would have been music playing in the background, by the way. And I would just keep the music going and I would invite people to write about their experience while it's fresh. And after the writing, I would invite them to share. Again, the power of community. Because as we hear each other sharing our experience, I think new pathways open in each other where we see and we experience, oh yeah, that's what it felt like for me too. Or yeah, I sort of felt that or thought that and I wasn't sure. And So we get affirmation from each other. So I kind of, because of our time constraint, I would spend much longer with this if I were actually doing it in a seminar group.
Well, luckily, you have a workshop coming up, I believe, September 22nd to 24th in Fallbrook, California.
That's right.
Yeah, it's called Nourishing the Soul of the Strong and Weary Woman. And I'm just wondering, would you like to say a little bit about it as we wrap up?
Yes, I'm partnering with another trainer friend. She and I have been doing women's work together, and I also do women's work on my own. And, we just feeling what it's like to be a woman in the world today. I'm a mother of two, grown daughters, both of whom are professional women, both of whom, one of whom is raising a family, and both of whom, have very high-powered, demanding, responsible jobs. And I see not only through my own daughters, but, just sensing women in the world today, that we are living in such a fast-paced society, and the demands and the pressures are so great that we lose ourselves. We lose contact with our essential selves. We become focused on the doing, and we lose contact with the being, who we are being. We lose contact with our, what I would call, our essential, juicy, feminine self, our goddess self. And we kind of become doing machines. And we're strong, and we're capable and responsible. And, we get the job done. But we forget ourselves. We forget to nurture and take care of ourselves. So this weekend is a weekend for women to come and kind of lay it down. Lay down the everyday life. Lay down the responsibilities and, come and rest and share and be nurtured from the inside out. Eat good food. Take long walks in nature. Do some movement, do yoga, do meditation, do writing, do circle work. It's that kind of a thing.
It sounds lovely and rejuvenating. And if you would like to know more about it, you can find out about it on Judith's website, which again is www.judithrich.com, JUDITHRICH.com. And Judith, it's just been such a delight to have you here on Bespoken Bones. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been a real delight to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thanks, folks, for listening to this episode. I am Pavini Moray, and we will be back every full and new moon with more embodied goodness and ancestral wisdom.